Today on this episode of At Home with Eastbrook Homes, we are talking with Becky Sims from Lake Michigan Credit Union. She is Senior Loan Officer, and we're going to dive in a little bit deeper to mortgage rates and tips for you if you're buying a home this year. And as I said, our guest today from LMCU, it is Becky Sims. Becky, first, before we get into this, how are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I'm super happy to be here.
I am happy to have you. Obviously, June is National Homeownership Month, so we have a lot to jump into. And if you're thinking of getting into the housing market, you probably have a lot of questions, which is, of course, why I brought you on here. So let's start with kind of the state of the market and maybe some challenges that homeowners might be facing if they're leaping in this year to either buy a new home or change homes.
I would say the biggest challenge right now probably for home buyers is inventory. There's not a lot of houses available and a lot of people wanting to buy. So that's a big challenge right now. And then also interest rates, are definitely affecting affordability. The good news with rates is, though, they're temporary. So I don't think it's a reason to not get in the market, but it's definitely a reason to, talk to a loan officer, figure out what you can afford before you start house shopping.
Now, Becky, when we're talking about rates, is there kind of a guideline or a direction you might give a home consumer, a home buyer, that they could know? Or is it best to just reach out to someone like yourself at LMCU and ask? Or how do they kind of figure that out outside of just being bombarded with news stories day in and day out? How do they make an educated decision about, okay, I can live with this rate, let's go, versus, oh, that's a terrible idea, let's wait?
Sure. So definitely talking to a loan officer, I think at LMCU is preferred, but getting an idea of how rate affects your payment and how much you can afford really is the best bet for people. I don't think there's a rate that's going to totally scare people away. Sure. There's definitely things we can look at. A lot of people are looking at adjustable rates now. I know those kind of have a negative connotation, but there's definitely a purpose for them, getting you into a lower interest rate in the beginning. You can always look to refinance to a fixed once rates come down. Rates, like I said, are temporary. They're not going to be this high forever. Biggest point I want to stress is just talk to a loan officer about what you can afford. I think what you can afford within mortgage guidelines is more than what you'd want to spend. I don't think it's a comfortable place to be. So just understanding what I can afford and what I should afford, I think those are two different numbers. So, just make sure that you have somebody that's advocating that for you and not saying, well, you can buy, $1 million house when you really shouldn't.
Right.
If you ever want to go out to eat or do anything other than make a house payment.
Because obviously in the last 4 years, you and I have seen this particular sector of the United States kind of do one of these. So, from your perspective, with your wealth of knowledge, what are some best practices outside of obviously understanding the rate about getting into the housing market?
So understanding the market, I think, is a good one. Understanding how much houses cost, what you have to offer to get a house. And also your credit score. Credit score is the biggest defining factor of what your interest rate is going to be. So if you have the time, let's take a look at your credit, and I can offer up some suggestions on how we can improve that credit score to improve that interest rate to make that house payment more affordable.
And speaking of getting educated, a lot of times when people are stepping into this market for the first time, or even reach a season in their life where they're going to go to the next thing, they will use the phrase dream home. And so do you have some kind of advice or maybe creative ways to leverage what you have to get into your dream home, knowing that the market is what the market is?
A lot of people right now that do want to make a move, but they think, where am I going to go? Right? I don't want to sell my house if I don't know where I'm going to live next. So we do look at doing maybe a home equity loan. So you can take that equity in their current home, use it as a down payment for the next house, and then they can buy without selling. And then once they sell, they buy the new one, they can sell the old one and take those funds and apply it to their new mortgage. So that alleviates that worry of, I'm going to be homeless, right?
Right.
So that's a great way for people to buy that dream home that they want.
I'm going to tell you, Becky, I've been doing this podcast with Eastbrook for a long time. I've actually never heard someone say it like that. And I think that's a super genius tip, because that's the chasm, right? When you talk about, and we're about to talk about it in a second, when you talk about new construction, that's the thing where you're like, oh no, I don't want to, like, what am I going to do in that scary in between where I don't have my old house and I don't have my new house. But let's talk about the idea of new construction and how someone might think about that if they're looking for their dream home, new home, current home.
And new construction is a great option right now because builders are the only ones that have inventory, right? So you can build your dream home, build everything that you want in it. You're not having to overbid on an existing home just to win. So it's a great option to get into a house right now. And a lot of people are choosing that. Like we said, you can build, you can have some time to get your current home ready to sell. We move that equity forward for a down payment, and you sell your house maybe when the new house is almost done or right after. So building right now is a fantastic option.
So Becky, last question, and then I will let you go. You've obviously been in this space for long enough to kind of understand, to the best of your ability, where things are going. Can you frame up for us perhaps the last 4 years and maybe what was happening in peak 2020 and compare that to what's happening right now, so people can kind of get a perspective of, it was totally crazy in mid 2020 into 2021. Like, how does that compare to right now when you're talking about inventory and rates and those sorts of things?
So rates are definitely a lot higher than they were in 2021. Inventory is still low. I think it's worse now than it was then. I mean, builders are certainly trying to catch us up in building as many homes as they can. But I would say the demand is still there. There's a lot of people wanting to buy homes. So it is pretty easy to sell your house right now. You just really have to be more cautious on payment and really understand interest rates now. I mean, they were so low in 20 and 21. Where they are now is totally different. I don't think that we'll ever see those rates again. Usually 5.5 is a healthy market, and I think we'll get there, not this year, but hopefully next year. But I think it's definitely, you can still buy a house. You just really want to get educated in how much it's going to cost, what your monthly payment looks like, and make sure that you're good with that and it fits in your lifestyle.
Becky Sims, thank you so much for the time. We will catch up maybe at the end of this year and see what we're looking into to 2025.
Sounds good. Thanks, Eric.